Okay, so in this video here, we are going to talk about some of the updates to the JavaScript language that have been made with ES6. Okay, so let me pull up my slides. Okay, you can see here, just like any other programming language or any human language for that matter, JavaScript evolves. It's not a stagnant language. Modifications are made to make programming cleaner, more efficient, and an overall better experience. ECMAScript 6, or ES6 for short, was first introduced in 2015. With ES6, syntactical changes were made to JavaScript that became the new standard for writing it. Let's look at some of these changes. Okay, so yeah, as stated here, just like any other language, uh, changes made to the JavaScript language, to the syntax and the things that we can do with it. And let's look at them. Let's look at some of them. That's not everything. I don't think this list is exhaustive, but we're gonna look at some of the things here. Here we go. Starting off with let and const. The keyword let and const are used to create containers where we previously used var. The let keyword works very similar to var. When using let, we can assign variables that can be changed later. There are some differences when it comes to scope, but for the most part, let can be used interchangeably with var. The const keyword creates a container. However, with const, we create a constant, which means that it cannot be changed later. Also, when using const, it must be initialized and assigned in the same line. Okay, so let's look at this. We're using ES6 syntax. Okay, and these are just some of the changes again that has been made to JavaScript since 2015. Now, at first, initially, it was called ES 2015 or 15, something like that. And then there was a new change that was made, um, and then there was another iteration of it. And so instead of like signifying the year or version that it was made, any change that has been made since 2015 has been a part of just what we refer to as ES6. Okay. But the first one again is var. Now we have let and const. Okay. So previously what we've been doing, if we had a variable, we say var my age gets 45. Okay. And what we can do now, instead of using var, the var keyword, another keyword that we can use that works in the same way is let. Okay, so I'm going to comment out var my age, and we can say let my age gets 45. Okay. And so with the let keyword here, we can use this, we can use let in some cases as a replacement to var. Find console.log my age. You will see here there's 45. And let me do this because I always forget to do. There we go. And then you get to be your own thing. Cool. So there's 45. Okay. And with let, again, we can we can update it. So see here where I am updating my age to 46 in today's what, the 7th. So it's what, like 35 days. Count down till Satchmas. All right, but we see that we can update a let variable. Okay, so that's different from const. Okay, so I can say const is awesome. Now here you can see where this is already differing. Okay, and let's examine this real quick. Let me come back here. If I say let is awesome, when I use the let keyword, just our keyword, when well, I can initialize this variable without having to assign it anything. And Greg, I just see your message. I'm so sorry. That's when you know you're getting it. When you start having dreams of writing code, those are like the worst dreams in the world. Like I just for me they are. I'm trying to get away from you for a second, please. Even in my sleep, I gotta write code. Yeah, I remember those days. They don't come as much, but when I first started learning how to code, it was having dreams. Like this is not. I don't like this right here. Which I'm gonna get back to the lesson. The sidebar. That's why I didn't major in computer science when I was in college, because the saying was that if you the computer science major, that's all they knew. Like they couldn't do anything. They had no other function in society other than computer science. And so like I didn't want to do it because I had my first roommate, he was my first two roommates were engineering majors. And they were taking some Fortran courses, and they were talking about the computer science folks saying, you don't want to do this. And I would look at some of the stuff they were doing. I'm like, oh, this makes sense. I get this. They're like, you should be majoring in this. If this makes sense to you, maybe you should major in it. And like I said, everybody was saying how if you were a computer science major, that's all you could do. That's all your brain was good for. Like, nope, I don't think so. So yeah, those coding dreams are not fun. But anyways, as you can see here, like I stated here on line 17, we can see that let is awesome. That is valid because I'm using the let keyword, which like the var in this instance, I can initialize the variable without having to assign it. Okay, so this works. That is different from const. If I use const, so the const, you see a squiggly line showing up right here. It doesn't like that. With const, I have to initialize and assign at the same line. I'm going to set that to true. And the reason why we do that is because this const keyword, it's not a variable. It is a container, okay? It's not a variable because variables change. It is a constant, okay? And so if I console.log is awesome, there you see I do get true, okay? And I do, and the key thing about constants is I cannot reassign this thing. So I get is awesome is false. Now if I try to log out, is awesome, you see I get it here. Assignment to constant variable. Once I assign it a value, that value cannot be changed. All right. So I say const is awesome is false. I cannot, well, if I say const is awesome is true, then I cannot go and set it to anything else, which I can't anyways because I'm constantly awesome. That's true. So that can't be changed. But let's look at something else. Let's see this because I know we use const or we use var with variables. What about with an array? So if I say const again teams, I'll say NL teams, make this an array. The Dodgers. Oh, the Padres. Poor Padres. The trashy Diamondbacks. And then bless their heart. They're out there. I hope they're giving their fans a good time. Oh, you Rockies. Oh, let's see what I do. Oh, that's what I did. Let me move this over here. All right, so there's const NL teams. If we log out in NL teams, all right, there we see the array. Let's see what happens if we try to add something to the array. Can we do that? Let's say I say NL teams dot push, and I'm just gonna make up a team, the Bananas. Maybe the one day Savannah Bananas will become a National League team. Let's see if this works. And that does work. Okay, so give your time back in the Mets. Haha. So we see here with arrays. Now you see that I can take this NL teams and store an array here as a const, in which case I can add to the array. Okay. So that is fine. I changed up the array. It's still an array. Okay. Even though the items in it is different, it is still an array. But let's see what happens if I try to say NL teams gets food. Let's see what happens then. You see, there it is. We get it. We get our error message, assignment to a constant variable. So what I was doing here, trying to change NL teams from an array to a string, and it wasn't having it. Okay. So when it comes to const, okay, let me comment that out. We'll delete that. When it comes to const, if you're using const as you would say a traditional variable where you're just storing a single item in there, that cannot be changed. Okay. You cannot change that. If you are using const to create an object or an array, you can update that object or array, but you cannot change it from an array or an object to something else. Okay. Once you establish that, okay, this is an array, I can't change it. Okay. So that's how const works. Okay. And we'll see const some more in a little bit, but um there's initial something to look at. Okay. Now this other thing we have here with let. Okay, let's go back to let and var because here in the slides we mentioned that it was very similar, but there are some differences when it comes to scope. Okay, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for var I gets 0, I is less than equal to 10, I plus plus, and I'm going to say console.log I. And oh, I need to comment this out right here. Okay, so when I do this, and for the record, I would just like to get rid of the Diamondbacks just because we don't have to add anything there. Just get rid of the Diamondbacks. You know, I'm one of those sports fans, like, for the most part, the teams that I hate, it's like I don't even want them to exist. You know, yeah, the Giants, I forgot them. See, I didn't even add them. Look at that. Let me add the Giants in here. But yeah, like the Giants, Diamondbacks, those two especially, I really hate. Padres are like little bro. Rockies just like bless their heart, you know. But Giants and Diamondbacks, like I don't even want them to exist. When it comes to basketball, I don't want the Clippers to exist. I hate the Clippers. Celtics, I hate them, but I want them in the finals every year so we can play so it can be Lakers, Celtics every year. That's what I want. Clippers, I hate them. I don't even want them to. They didn't move out of LA. Anyways, here we go. um, so here you can see when I console.log, I is going to return 0 through 10. Now watch this. If I come over here and I say console.log I, there you see I is 11. Okay, cool. I wonder what would happen, if anything would happen, if I change this from var to let. Okay, now I'm changing this to let. So I'm saying let I get 0, console.log I. And now you can see here, I get a reference error. I is not defined. And the reason why I is not defined is because this let keyword here is block scope. Meaning, what does that mean? It means only that block has reference to this I. Only this block of code right here has reference to what I is. And we see that's different from doing this here. When I said, not let var, but when I say var I get 0, wait, what do I do now? Oh, var I, yeah, got that. So when I say var I get 0, I have created a variable inside this I, which we can see accessible outside of I. Down here I got 11 on line 37. When I use let, what that does is that holds this I that we're creating here inside the for loop. It is locally scoped, so it's only accessible inside of the for loop, in which case we get the reference error I is not defined. All right. So let's look at this, because we see how that works. We wrote a function. Let's say, I'll say function log array items. Okay. And that will take in an array as an argument. Okay. And I could say var I'll say var I gets 0 right here. And I can say for I is equal to 10 I plus plus. I don't know if this is gonna work. I'm trying. No. Array dot length. There we go. Console dot log array I. And come out here. Console dot log I. And I'll say log array items good for me. I already have an array. Here I'm saying, I got var I get 0. So you can see it's done out here. Is initialized. Where am I going with this? I think I know. But anyways, there we go. So it consoles the teams. How did bananas? Oh yeah, I know how. That's right. And then we get undefined right here. And it console 7. Okay, so with console teams, we got an undefined because there's no I7. And then when we console.log I right here, we got 7. Okay. But if I said, say, let I get 0, here we get Dodgers, we get all the teams. We do get undefined on line 44 because it's, let me comment this out and comment that out. See what that's doing. Comment. Oh, wait, no, that's not it. Where are you coming from, undefined? Because let I get 0. Okay, so I know, well, this I here, this I up here. Okay. And that's why I is still 0. Okay. Oh, because I got less than or equals. It should be less than. That's why. Yeah, less than 10. There you go. Or less than the array length. Okay, there we go. That makes sense. So console.log I. There we go. And so this let is what we call var, however, is function scope. So the var keyword can work in and out of the block. Okay, and we kind of looked at that when we talked about scope, and that var global, well, var scope gets global, and then switching it to a local scope. And we see how you can access it within. Let is purely block scope. So nothing outside of this block would have access to this I. Okay. So there are times where you would want to use var. There are times where you want to use let. Okay, between the two of them. I write my code, me personally, in such a way that I can just get away with let all time. But it's not so much the keyword is how I structure my code. It is really how I think through a problem that enables me to use let and const without having to use var. But not everybody's like that, okay? I would have to say, yeah, I would be a failure to you all if I did not say that. Especially for somebody new, you just want to be careful when using let when choosing between let and var, okay? And I'm not saying that you guys sit there and mull 15 minutes on it, but you have to think about what this variable is doing, like what will have access to it, how can it be manipulated, do I want it to be manipulated, okay? um Say when it comes to uh something things that are more permanent, uh like some kind of formula, like converting um temperatures, like we've been doing, converting Celsius to Fahrenheit. I can use const right there because that formula is not going to change. The way that we convert Celsius to Fahrenheit and Fahrenheit to Celsius, that's not going to change. So I could say, you know, was it const cell gets, was it fa, was it times what, 5/9 uh minus 32 or whatever it is. That could work because that's not going to change. Okay, the way we convert temperatures is not going to change. So using const is valid right there. Okay, that'll work just fine. However, when the contents that are in the container can change, then you want to go with var or let. Okay, um, so that's that on that. I know I spent a lot of time on that. But let's move on. And you can see here that if I say am awesome is false, that's definitely causing an error because it's not true. It can never be true. All right, here we go. Ternary operator. The ternary operator is a way to write if else statements. Okay, so let's go back and do that first um, exercise we did. Ternary operator. So we said I'll say let am hungry get set to true. I do, Robin. I love ternary operators. I do. Is I will write out an if statement, if else statement first to make sure that it works, and then immediately change it to a ternary. Okay, so here we go. Let am hungry get set to true. This is probably my third favorite thing in ES6. It's my third favorite. Let am hungry get set to true. And I can say, hey, if am hungry, then console.log I'm hungry. When is lunch? Else console.log I just ate. I need a nap. Okay, so here we are. We have our if else statement here. Okay, and everybody should be comfortable with this by now. If not, go back and watch my previous video, brought to you by the Mississippi Coding Academies, and whatever sponsor wants to pay me for these videos. But anyways, here we go. So am hungry is true. So I got I'm hungry. When is lunch? Cool. Okay. I can rewrite this. I can rewrite this and shorten this up with a ternary. All right. And the way that it looks is this. We have an expression, or I'll say not an expression, rather, well, it is an expression. I'm going to say a Boolean expression because that's really what it is. So we have a Boolean expression, question mark, okay, and then we will do stuff, colon, do something else. All right. And this is how it looks. And you read it like, hey, is this thing true? If it is, question mark. If it is, then do something else. That's what the colon represents. Do something else. Okay. And so it just really shortens our code up, and eliminates all those extra keywords and square brackets. So I'm going to comment this out right here. I'm going to rewrite it. Say, am hungry, question mark. That's not how you spell console at all. Console.log. I'm hungry. When is lunch? Else, console.log. I just ate. I need a nap. Okay. And you can see here, it does it on one line and one line only. Okay. So the thing you got to remember with the ternary, okay, is first you start with the Boolean expression. So whatever is in front of the question mark, it needs to evaluate to true or false. Okay. Then what do we do if it's true? Colon, not a semicolon, but a colon. So it's else. What do we do if it's false? Okay. And so these are particularly easy to use, especially again when you have an if else and that's it. Okay. When you know you want to do this one thing or another. Okay. Now, if you don't have an else condition, let's say you just wanted to do something only if something evaluates to true. Let's say if I say, get rid of var for right now. So I'm gonna say var -8. Okay. I'm sorry. Let num get -8. There we go. So let num get -8. All right. And I can say, hey, is num greater than 0? In other words, is it positive? If it is, console.log positive. And so maybe I don't want it to do anything unless it's positive. In which case, if I do that, I put a colon and I say null right there. So now when I get, hey, is num greater than 0, console.log positive, else null, which means don't do anything at all. So this way we just write an if statement and not worry about anything. So that's different from if else. We just write an if statement here like so, and it'll work. So you can see nothing gets console because -8 is not greater than 0. But if I remove that negative, just change that to 8, you see I get positive. Okay. So what we can do with ternaries. Oh, you can think of the first clause being read as a question. Is am hungry true? After the question mark, we state what we want the program when the clause evaluates to true. The colon represents the else clause. You can see the ternary operator cleans up our chains of if statements significantly. Notice the absence of all those pesky curly braces. And you see there also, if we don't want anything else to return, we can write null after the colon, like I just shared with you. Okay. Other thing is with a ternary operator, and I don't have mentioned in the slides because I think it's personally, and it's just me, and I know that. But I think um, chaining ternary operators is sloppy code and makes it much less readable. Coach, what do you mean by that? What I mean is when say you have an else if statement, right? Where you have more than two options, okay, or more than two conditions, three or more. Um, you can you can write that using a ternary operator. Okay, you can. Um, However, it does make the code much less readable, and I believe personally that if you are going to um, write a a conditional statement with three or more conditions, then you can use else if or switch. All right. You want to use that instead. What I mean by that, like say the same example, num is zero. If I come over here and I say, hey, is num equal to zero, then console.log uh, zero. Else num is greater than zero, then console.log positive. Else console.log even. Um, this is much more difficult to read, okay? Um, because again, they can get long, and a lot of times developers would like to, put these on different lines, maybe tab this over to kind of help. Uh, but I still think when you're starting to do this, you can be you can stand to be a little more explicit, um, and just use a traditional else if statement. It's not going to kill anyone to use an else if statement. So here's where I would not, in a case like this, I would not use a ternary. I would just go with else if. Also, the other thing with ternaries is you cannot do like several lines of code. I mean by that, I can have like, this, elaborate task that I wanted to do inside of a ternary. No, it's like keep it like short and brief. I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose of a ternary if you got long mountains of code inside of ternary. So keep it brief. So let me put. I'm not going to delete that. I'm just going to say, um, uh, valid code, but okay. Let's move on. This is my favorite. Um, arrow functions. Functions can also be written differently by using arrow functions. Let's see how this works. We're going to write a function that will take a number num and return num squared. Okay, so let's do it the way that we're used to doing it. Let's come over here and arrow functions. Okay, so we'll say function num squared takes num as an argument, and we'll say return num raised to the second power. Okay, and there's our function. So we can rewrite this using an arrow function like so. Okay, and we see const num squared, and then we get our arrow right here, and that's why we call it arrow function, because we have this thing that's like an arrow and return num squared. So we can rewrite this here. Let's say rewriting num squared as an arrow function. And this is what I always do. Const num squared gets, and then open parentheses, I'm passing num right there. And then you make your arrow. I could say num 2, num squared, like so. This is what I love to do. I love arrow functions. The only time I use the function keyword now, is that the only time? No, not the only time, but almost exclusively is when I'm teaching basic JavaScript, when I'm starting from scratch teaching people JavaScript. There's some other times where I would use the function keyword, like if I'm doing sometimes when I'm doing a promise, making an async await function, I would use the function keyword then sometimes. But other than that, uh, I use the const keyword. And so let's look at this. What does it say in the slides? Instead of using the function keyword, we use const to create the function. The arguments are written inside the arrow. You see like there that num. As with other functions, if an argument is not needed, we wouldn't place anything on the inside, okay? Also notice that we did not need a return keyword with the function, with the arrow function. The arrow function has an implied return statement. Therefore, we do not need to use the keyword. And let me go back. So yes, so with the with the arrow function, in other words, we don't have to say return. Okay. And I know someone asked about, I believe it was Day that asked about the fat arrow when we were doing for each loops. Okay. And what I mentioned, what that arrow means is return. Okay. So this is the output, whatever comes after that arrow. And that's the main reason why I like to use arrow functions, because there is an implied return in it. Okay. So now, if I say, yeah, I mean, if this works, I can say, let me comment this one out. If I console.log num squared and then put 4 right there, okay, and 16. So I don't have to, this function, what I was saying, well, yeah, with this, I don't have to use a return statement, okay? And that's the cool thing I like about it. And again, if you can see, if you have a function that's pretty simple where you're just returning one thing or just completing this simple task, you could do it on one line. And that's also what I like about arrow functions, because it can shorten up my code. It's still very readable, very explicit. Is explaining what it's doing. I'm taking num and returning num squared, and there you have it. So I love to use arrow functions. All right. Now, if the function, just like any other function, if this is requiring me to do more than one task, or more, it's going to take more than one line of code, I would, const num cubed if I need to break it out into another more lines than I could, and I use curly braces to do that. So I say num cube, and I can say let cubed value get num raised to the third power, and then console.log num to the third power is cubed value. Okay, and then here, because I have multiple lines, okay, here I do need to return cube value. Okay. And 4 to the third power 64. Cool, that works. Okay. But I have multiple lines here, so I do need to return. All right. But if it's one line like so, you don't need a return statement. And technically, I'm not certain. I have to check and see, but I still think you don't need a return, even if it's like multiple lines like this. It depends. Because sometimes you do want to explicitly say what you are returning. So that is true. I would say use that at your discretion. Okay. But yeah, arrow functions, that's the way I go. And we use the const keyword with it, okay? That's another cool thing about it, because now I can't, now with this const keyword, and you see the difference here, when I use function num squared here, I was able to come over here and say const num squared and use that here. Okay, I hope you can see that. I said function num squared when I wrote I forget what the exact name is called, but this traditional function, when I wrote this function out and I used the name num squared for it, which again it works fine. However, when I use const num squared, when I use this const keyword, you can see that I was able to take that. Now let's see what happens if I try to num squared gets foo. Identifier num squared has already been declared at line 87. So it acknowledges this one. It didn't acknowledge this here up here on line 82. It didn't say, hey, it's already been declared up here on line 82. It says it's been declared already on line 87. So that's another reason why I like to use arrow functions, because when you create a function, that arrow function, and it binds that name so that that name cannot be used anywhere else. All right. So it protects your code. It creates a security for your code so that I can't come over here and rename I can't take num squared and give it something else, because I use that const keyword right there, and I've already assigned that to be a function. And that's different from, again, if I were just using the function keyword. All right, moving right along. Let's go. Of course, like our traditional JavaScript functions, arrow functions may require a little more work to execute. When this happens, we can wrap our block of code inside curly braces like any other function. And here we have right here, greet customer. And let's do that. I like this one. I forgot about that. I say const greet customer. And we took the name of the customer. So name. All right. And then we said let time get new date. And to get hours is get hours. So we get the time, and we can say, hey, is a time less than or equal to 12? Then what do? Console.log. And then we're going to do this. We're going to use a backtick. So the backtick is the key above your tab. I'm going to say good morning, comma, $ curly brace, name, like so. Console.log, same thing. I'm going to backtick in there. Good evening, comma, $ curly brace, name. And then when I say, and I can return, I'll just say return right there. Greet customer Keisha. I got an error somewhere. I'm squared. Let me, oh yeah, there it is. I can't use that right there. Good evening, Keisha. All right, cool. So you should have that. Pause it again. All this stuff looks so strange, but this is so far putting everything to use. When we added something here. We used the let keyword. We got const. Made an arrow function. Used a ternary. Ooh-wee. Just wrote inside our console.log command. If you're like me, you've probably gotten tired of concatenating all those strings to write out messages. I hate it. Having a string plus some variable plus string plus another variable string is just annoying. I hate it. So if you're like me, and this is in my top three. This is in my top three things I love about ES6, the string template literal. Because with the string template literals, we can change the way that we write strings. Instead of using quotation marks, we wrap everything inside of the backtick symbol. And again, that's the key that is above your tab button. Then whenever we want to inject our JS code, we wrap it inside of this $ curly brace symbol. Okay. And you can see here, not only can we place a variable inside a $ in curly brace combo, but we can also place any kind of expression inside and it will get evaluated. In other words, I could say, here in this example, whatever name is being passed in right here. So we have our backticks and say good morning and then $ curly brace and then name. And when we use that right there, what it does is it creates a template for our string and it'll pass in wherever the $ curly brace, it'll pass in JavaScript code. So you can think of this as like, here we have a string and anywhere we have a $ curly brace, that is where we're putting in JavaScript code. Okay. So I could say console.log, again, here in backticks, 8 times 2 is, and then $ curly brace, and I can say 8 times 2. And this will evaluate to 16. And there we go. We see 8 times 2 is 16. We could also do this. Check this out. I could say, and this is where that return statement comes into play. I could say for that, using that num squared, I could say, because let's see, where are you? Num squared. Notice we're not consoling anything here, num squared. We're just returning num squared. So I could say console.log 6, oh, excuse me, backtick 6 squares, and I can actually put an entire function in here. Num squared, put 6 right there, like so. So I can run, and it's returning this value. So that return again is the output, and that output is being passed in side of my $ curly brace for my string template literal. And so I get 6 squared is 36. How cool is that? So you could do some pretty high level stuff using string template literals. One, it makes the string much more readable because you don't have to again use all the concatenation and stuff to like add and take away. Well, it means not, sorry, not take away, but add this string to another string and then place this variable or what have you on the inside. No, you can simply uh you write out your structure as you would, which means that you also don't have to worry about single quotes and double quotes because you can add them as you need to, you know. um what I mean by that is, I could say uh say my name, has a name right here. Oh, and I just say return. No, I don't need a return right there. That you see that error came up because again, this arrow means return, so I don't need return right there. And I could say just return name. And I could say console.log he said, and in quotes, my name is, I put here quote, and I can run say my name, Satch, and close that right there, and then close that. And he said, my name is Satch. So that looks like an actual, well, grammatically correct sentence right there. So yeah, with string template literals, you don't have to worry about whether you're using single quotes and double quotes and having to escape or anything. Also, you see that you can inject JavaScript, not just a variable, but you can also store in it an expression, and that expression will get evaluated to a simplest form. You can pass in a function like so, and it will work. So I think what ES6 does when we look at these examples, it makes JavaScript a lot more powerful and enables us to do things that we couldn't do. One, it provides um, layers of security over our names, which is very important. Uh, Again, using let inside of a block, it out or binds that term to local scope so it can't be accessible outside of the block, which is a lot of times that's what we want to do. Um, Also, with the use of const, we can't change certain things. Okay, so if we have a variable, well, a string or a number value that we don't want to ever change, let's say it's a particular number for, or value for a formula or something. We don't change that. So const uh, works out in our favor there. It is much safer and smarter to use than var or let. Also, we see with arrow functions, not only can we shorten up the code with an arrow function, we have an implied return with an arrow function. And also, once we use that arrow function and using that const keyword, then we cannot assign the name of that function to anything else, which is good. That's what we want to do, because we want that function to be able to handle itself properly and not be corrupted. And we see with string template literals, we can eliminate again all of the concatenation, and we can inject pure JavaScript code inside of our our templates, which means that enables us, and it reinforces us, or encourages us rather, to write more functions. Because if we write functions, then those functions can be used to shorten up our code with string template literals and also with ternary operators. What do you mean by that? I'll show you what I mean by that. Um, let's say I'm gonna write two functions here. I'm gonna say const uh, add 5. Okay, and add 5 is gonna take a number, and it's just gonna return num plus 5. Okay, and then I'll write another function called const add 6. Does the same thing. Gonna take a number and take num plus 6. Okay, so what I can do is, so I have let num way up here. There you are. So I have let num is 8, still there. I'll make sure it's still 8. Let me console .log num, and still 8. Okay, cool. I just want to check. So I can do this. I can say, hey, is num modulus 2 equal to 1? Well, if so, add 5 num, else add 6. And matter of fact, because we're not going to see this, so let me console this. So I console log up right there, and then console log 6. Okay, so this is doing some pretty crazy things. So it's saying, hey, if num is odd, add 5, else add 6. Console, and there it gets 14 because num is 8. So you can, if I were writing this out using vanilla JavaScript, this would be much longer. Very doable, right? But it just take much longer. Say, hey, if num modulus 2 is equal to 1, console.log, or I could say, yeah, because if I were doing this the old-fashioned way, then I would have to write a function out for add 5 and add 6 or what have you, which I'm not going to do all that. You can see here that you can make your code much cleaner, much more efficient um, when you use ES6 syntax. So yeah, those are like the really cool things with ES6 syntax. Okay. Um, Throughout the remainder of this course, I will be employing ES6 syntax when applicable. There are times where I'm going to go when I'm going to use, um, pure vanilla JavaScript. And when I do that, it is because it is the better option. Um, and there are times where um, even in that, if I can, I'll write something out using vanilla JavaScript and then I'll refactor it using ES6 syntax when possible. But just know for the most part, um, and I'm in the remainder of this course, I'll be using ES. Okay, so we'll put this, okay, and do some things with it before we move on. But that is it with this video. I know this lesson got kind of long, but I want to cover all these different things in ES6 syntax, and you all know how I like to meander uh, and talk about different things, to kind of make it keep you listening, if you will. I couldn't just be just going over, this is const. This is what the const keyword does. This is why the const keyword is useful. This is the let keyword. This is why the let keyword is useful. Here's our ternary operator. As you can see, it is different from our traditional if-else statements in that we have a question mark and colon. And no, that's boring. I'd fall asleep myself. No, I got to liven up a little bit. That's right, Robin. Thumbs down to that. Anyways, this video got long. So go back and watch this video again. Try the stuff out. Practice with it. Subscribe to this channel, Satch Work, if you haven't already. Like, share, comment, all that stuff. I appreciate it because I work really hard at all this stuff and trying to be better at it every single day. Uh, Not just so I can, teach effectively, but I want to be like excellent at software development. So I gotta stay up on and practice stuff. All right, so I'll see you on the other side of this video. I don't know what's on the other side of this video, but I'll see you on the other side of this video.